And for this week's show, I am pleased to be joined by the president of the Elizabeth Historical Society, the Elizabeth Forum, and that's Dr. Paul Mattingly. Dr. Mattingly, welcome to the show.
Nice to be back.
And we've always talked with you in the past, and you know, you're a professor at, give us a little bit of background.
Well, New York University.
Right.
I've been there almost 40 years.
You don't look old enough to be there 40 years.
I feel like I'm about 40, but I've been there a long time, and it's been a very happy circumstance, and I'm about to move into a retirement mode and a writing, not a teaching mode.
And you've been teaching there for 40 years.
Yeah.
And your doctorate is in?
American history, University of Wisconsin.
And you teach history?
Yes, American history, and for many years I was the director of the program in public history, which trains people to do history outside of academia. That is to say, documentary films, exhibits, archaeological interpretation, things like that.
Sounds interesting. I always liked American. I think I've told you this story.
Yeah.
My father, I always wanted to be a history teacher. My father said, if you become a history teacher, you won't get any money. And
he's probably right.
He's probably right. So, but I went into politics. I'm still not making any money, and I'm not following a passion. But I love history, as you know.
Good. Yes, I do know that.
Today we're going to talk to members of the Elizabeth Historical Society, yourself, and researchers about an upcoming Elizabeth Forum to be held on June 13th. And it's going to be held at the Belcher Ogden Mansion.
Yes, 6:30 to 8:30. And parking is available in the Devon Ale House, which is across the street at 10:45.
Now tell us about the Belcher Ogden Mansion first, before we start to talk about the forum itself.
Well,
the first governor of New Jersey, I believe.
No,
lived there?
No, but it's one of the few governors' residences of royal governors in the original 13 colonies. Most of the others are facsimiles, Williamsburg, etc. Most of these are facsimiles. This is the real article. He lived there and effectively made state-level judgments in the living room from the period of about 1751 to 1757 when he died there.
And that was Governor?
That was Jonathan Belcher.
Jonathan Belcher, right.
Yeah, and actually the upcoming forum, I will talk a little bit about him in a different kind of key because of some things that we have recently discovered. Subsequently, the house was bought by Aaron Ogden, whose ancestors had originally built the oldest portion of it, a frame portion, a small frame portion. And then they added on a larger frame portion, then they added on a single-story brick portion. And then when Jonathan Belcher said he'd like to come to Elizabeth for his health, they went up and they went over and created this. It's a jewel of Georgian architecture. I mean, there's really nothing like it. And you can read the history of the house by looking at the different brick configurations for each of these additions.
Now, the house across the street, the Devon Ale House, is actually the oldest house in the city, correct?
Yes, oldest house in Union County.
Probably one of the oldest in the country, actually. 1664 was when we were formed, but that house was built.
That's right.
That house was built in the late 1600s, or?
The first legal document says 1682, but it was already extant, so it was built before then. We don't know exactly how to date that, but it's been there 300 years.
Coming up on 400. Well, not yet, but.
Give it time. You know, it's in very good shape. It's in very good shape. We had a 5-year plan, and we're getting near the end of it. We've had some very loyal supporters, including the CDBG of the city. And we have a new roof, a new paint job, new plumbing, new everything. That house is in good working order.
And Nathaniel Bunnell was what?
He was a French Huguenot who came to Elizabeth by way of New Haven, then to Long Island, then to Elizabeth. It was a passage that a number of Protestant settlers followed. Most of the Elizabeth associates, the original first grouping, followed a lot of this pattern.
And Dr. Mattingly, before we talk about the forum, can you tell us a little bit about the Historical Society of Elizabeth, which
yes, thanks.
you clearly got going?
I touched a little bit on this. We were created in December of 1999, so we're kind of the new kids on the block. But in September of 2004, we took ownership of the Devon Ale House, which gave us, a serious historical presence in the city. And then in November of 2006, we took ownership of the Belcher Ogden. Now, we've now put that on a 5-year plan of restoration, much like we had for the Bonal House. And little by little, we will get there. We just got a very nice grant to do a new roof. And so that will happen this summer. But we are going to have this forum there to deliver on a lot of our short-term work, which is to say, on neighborhood reconstruction. You remember last year we did the reconstruction of 2 Irish neighborhoods. One of them was Kerry Head, where you were raised, and the other was St. Mary's. And we have done a neighborhood reconstruction of the area around the Belcher Ogden mansion. And it's tough because the boundaries of a neighborhood change. And they've changed quite a bit, as we have learned from testimony of people who've lived there. I mean, some of the people on Catherine Street have been there over 60 years. So they have good long memories of this. Some of them remember walking to St. Michael's when you could get all the way across 1 and 9 with one traffic light, which you can't do anymore. So in the earlier part, say even into the 1950s, the boundaries of the neighborhood were probably somewhere around St. Michael's, but subsequently they've kind of constricted. But we have taken this testimony and learned just how people saw each other, who was the major ethnic or racial group, what kinds of tensions, if any, have occurred there. And we learned some other things that I don't want to spill all of the really terrific stuff that I'm going to deliver on the 13th, but maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But
tell us about the any other activities of the Historical Society.
Yeah, much of what we have done and much of what history exists on the city. There's no 20th century history of the city. There's no late 19th century history of the city. We don't really know a lot about that. There are a couple of books that are sort of helpful. Mostly these are picture books. Charlie Aquilina did a really nice one when he was teaching at the high school. That's been very helpful to us. But what we are really trying to do is to get beyond the colonial history, which has fascinated the published parts of Elizabeth's history. There's a book called As We Were. It stops in 1840, and mostly it's about the colonial period. That's of great interest. There were very significant figures. George Washington visited the Belcher Ogden. Alexander Hamilton not only went to school in Elizabeth, but actually attended a wedding at Belcher Ogden. Other very distinguished figures have visited there. The Reverend Jonathan Edwards, maybe the greatest intellect of the 18th century in America, was a friend of Belcher. But it's like people talking about the history of Elizabeth get stuck in the 18th century. And what we're really trying to do is, since these houses have lasted to the present, what other kinds of things went on? I mean, who lived in these houses? Did people, view them differently, or as anchors to the city, or as special objects? The quick answer to that is no, they were residences. They were just old houses. Until very recently in the 20th century, was there ever any thought of treating the Belcher Ogden or the Bonal House as a museum?